Hello, I am now Crabtree from Crab Studios, and this is a slightly different video to what I usually do. The main difference is that this video is going to hopefully not be edited at all, and instead just going to be like a straight run video with no edits and just me talking more sort of naturally and just talking about some games which I like. In this video it's going to be mainly Calico, but I'm also going to be talking, of course, about Food Time Battle in Space, because the Kickstarter for my upcoming game, Food Time Battle in Space, which is this game here, will be launching February 2nd, which is, as of recording it, this video will probably go up the same day, is only 11 days away, so it'll be weird for me not to talk about it. But yeah, this video is going to have sort of like a wider topic about game design in general, which is what I really love talking about. I do have another channel called Now Crabtree Game Design, which is just all about video game design. But because I make board games, I thought I'd make a separate channel talking about board game design and also about my own games, which I publish under Crab Studios, my company. So yeah, this video is, the reason why I'm going to look over here is because I have notes. Usually I read off a script, so I'm going to be having notes this time. If I glance over here, that is why. It's because I'm looking at some notes. So what I want to talk about today is how restricting the player can be so beneficial towards your design. There are so many games which I played in which the designer has clearly looked at giving as much value to the player as possible in terms of like game time and game elements to the pound that they spend on the game itself, by giving them as many choices, as many mechanics, as many abilities, as many cards, as many anything as possible for the amount of money that they can spend on making the game. But what I'm here to tell you is that that might not be the best idea. This is because, in my view, and in the view of my tutors who have taught me game design at my university, I do game design as a degree as well, is that restrictions in game design, restrictions in what the player can actually do, is beneficial, because the main thing it does is it promotes creativity. When you're restricted, when you don't have many options, that is when you think the hardest, and that is when you try to come up with the best solution possible. And though that solution might be what ties you to that game, might be what makes you enjoy that game, might be what makes a connection between the player and the game itself, having those really tough decisions to make. And not only does it promote creativity, especially when the solutions to your problem that are designed into the game are so well thought out, but if we look at the other end of the spectrum, having as many choices as possible, those choices, in my opinion, dilute any meaningful choices there are in the game. So, say for example, if let's take Calico for example, because Calico is the game that I'm going to be talking about today alongside Food Time Battle in Space. In Calico, they limit the player in 5 different ways. They limit you by your tile drafting ability, because you can only draft 1 tile per turn, and on top of that there are only 3 tiles to draft from. And considering there are, if I do some quick maths, there are 6 unique colours and there are 6 unique patterns, so that's 36 variants of tiles. I might be slightly wrong there, and there's only ever 3 out at a time. That is some major restrictions. So they limit you via the market, which is what it's called, the tile drafting pool. They limit you by your hand size, because at any given time you can only have 2 tiles in your hand, and you place one and you pick one up. You are extremely limited, maybe slightly too harshly, which I will talk about slightly, even though this is mainly about the positives of Calico. You're very limited by your personal goals, which you have to place down on the board. Basically, you place down a hex, a tile which looks like this, but it's got a goal on it, and you have to place that down, and then that influences the tiles which you place around it, because you want to, say for example, let's use a tile. I don't actually have it out right now, but there is a tile in the game which says you have to have 6 unique colors around the tile, and you have to have 6 unique patterns around the tile as well. So by the time you're getting to that final tile, out of those 36 variants of tiles, you only need only one of those types. And yeah, and on top of that as well, these goal tiles overlap with other goal tiles. So you're not just thinking about that goal, you're thinking about 2 other goals on your board as well. So that's where I think it might get slightly too restrictive, because I've played a lot of games of Calico now, and I only bought it a couple of weeks ago. I've played a lot of games, and there are so many times when players just get too frustrated because there's too many things to think about. And unlike Sagrada, which is a very, very similar game, despite this being a tile drafting and laying game, and Sagrada being a dice drafting and laying game, very, very similar. With Sagrada, you have abilities which you can use to alter the stuff you've already placed down. In Calico, there is no such thing. So that's where I think it might fall short there, but unique player goals is one major way that it restricts the player. The cats, which are not unique goals to the player, but they are unique goals to everyone. So you get new cats every time you start a new game, and those cats require certain patterns placed down on your board in certain ways. So on top of your own unique goals, and on top of as well, you can get rewards for placing down 3 colours next to each other. You get 1 point bonus. So I don't usually focus on that, but people can, and it can be beneficial because games can be very close. So on top of the unique goals, on top of trying to place colours next to each other, you also have to consider these cats as well, which give you quite a lot of points. But it's just all these things interlocking together. But what that all benefits towards is just how meaningful every decision is. Because let's go back to the market for a second, where there are only 3 tiles available. Which is likely to happen, especially near the end of the game. If any of those 3 tiles aren't tiles which you want, which is likely, then you can easily look at other players' boards and see which tiles they want. And because how restricted players are, especially as the game progresses, these can create for some very intense moments, and even some bargaining I've had happen, like people saying like, I'll give you like £5 or like £10 if you don't pick up that tile because I need it that badly, and that sort of thing. And so those situations are very, very powerful, but also it does lead to creative moments as well. For example, let's say we go back to that goal which I mentioned earlier, the goal which you need 6 unique colours and 6 unique patterns surrounding that hexagon. There are 2 states for that goal. There is I think it's 10 points for just having either all unique colours or all unique patterns, and it's 15 points for having both unique colours and both unique patterns. So you can make the decision early on to pick up tiles and keep them in your hand, because like I said, you have 2 tiles in your hand, you place one down and pick another one up. You can keep like a safety hexagon, be like, okay, this isn't the colour I want, but it's the pattern that I want. And so I'm going to keep that, so even if other players see that I need that pattern and colour and they pick it up, I'm not completely screwed. Because say I don't pick up that tile, or I place it down somewhere else, then I could get to the point in the game where I don't have either the pattern or the colour, because that is likely as well, and it gets some very intense moments. I wouldn't wear this fleece when I'm playing Calico because of how sweaty I get just looking at other people picking up tiles. And all of this would not be possible if, say, the market wasn't 3 tiles but was instead 9 tiles. Because imagine, just the chances of finding the tile that you want is so much higher if there's 9 tiles and not 3 tiles. But on top of that, the chances of having 2 tiles which you want are higher, and so another player picking up one of the tiles you want isn't going to be nearly as impactful because there's another tile that you want. So all in all these restrictions come together to make for a very intense, creative game where every single choice matters, even the first tiles you pick up. And that leads me on to the other game which I want to talk about today, Food Time Battle in Space, because I'm going to talk about, and this is actually going to accompany a blog post as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube, then I'll leave a link to the blog post in the description below. And if you're watching this on the blog post, then you've already seen the video as well, because the video is going to accompany the blog post. But I do go into it in much more detail and probably much more eloquently as well, because it's written word and not just me rambling about stuff. But yeah, with Food Time Battle in Space, you can also see the development of the game from start to finish on that blog as well, and I'm going to hint to that during my explanation now of why I'm talking about it in this video. In Food Time Battle in Space, much like most board games, when starting out on playtesting, there was too many variables and too much to do, and that led to choices not being nearly as important and people just not having nearly as fun. The reason why Food Time Battle in Space is the way is how it's come to now, like it's come to the moment where it's going to be launched on Kickstarter, is because there was one mechanic which hasn't changed too much, but it has changed slightly, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which players really enjoyed. If that wasn't there, I probably would have just binned this game straight away because of how poorly the first playtesting sessions went. But now, playtesting sessions go amazingly. It's all about balancing. The gameplay is completely fine. I think it's really good, in my opinion, but other players do as well. And I'm going to tell you how I got there. So, first of all, Food Time Battle in Space. Well, I should actually mention, there's a how-to play video on my channel, but I will mention quickly that anytime in Food Time Battle in Space, you have 3 critics that you can attempt to complete. You can have a level 1 critic, a level 2 critic, and a level 3 critic. And the way you complete them is by placing ingredients in the correct order to that amount. So I would have to place 4 ingredients in the correct order to complete this one. I have to place 5 to complete this one. I have to place 9 to complete this one. But, and these are all in their own separate decks as well, as you can see this. So you will always have a level 1, level 2, and level 3 to try and complete. So depending on where you are in the game, how many abilities you have, how powerful you are, it influences which ones you pick up. That was more of a balancing thing. But it is relevant to what I'm trying to say, because at the start of Food Time Battle in Space's journey, there was, I think, 6 critics anybody could attempt to complete at any time. There weren't any level decks, and it was communal. And this wasn't good because, say for example, if there were a bunch of level 3 critics and there were a bunch of level 3 critics that had good abilities attached to them, then making the decision between which critic you wanted to complete compared to other people was almost completely arbitrary. You were just picking any, and it didn't really matter. And on top of that, it didn't matter because without these level decks, I wouldn't have been able to design such synergistic mechanics. For example, every single deck, which deck is this? This is the Lunaburger deck. So it has the Lunaburger Chef, and this deck is entirely about manipulating your hand size, which is another limitation I will get onto in a minute. But each restaurant has their own mechanic, which are each card is very synergistic with each other card. So when you are looking at which critic you want to attempt to complete, it's very easy to see which one of the 3 will probably work best with the other critics you have in your hand. But with the original version of the game, it was so difficult for that pool to have the right mechanics in there to be like, oh, that card will be very synergistic with other cards which I have, so I'll pick it up. That was very rare to see, or it was just abundant, just because of how little control I had as a designer to make sure those cards came out in the pool in the way that I wanted. Because without having that control, I was unable to design a good experience. So it was just completely random what would happen, and almost every time it was almost set in stone, despite it being technically random. The level 1 critics, there weren't levels back then, but what would be level 1 critics, sorry I had an itchy nose there, would be completed very quickly, and then eventually they would be replaced with much harder critics, or the game would just start out with much harder critics, and the game would become literally impossible to complete, because I hadn't been able to control the way players gain critics and their abilities to begin with. So almost every single time, people would be very ill-equipped to complete much harder critics, and the game would just become a standstill. But that does lead me on to the saving grace of that original design, which was the drawing and placing mechanic of the ingredients. So now each restaurant has 12 ingredients. So they have 12 ingredients in their deck. And you start by picking up 3 cards, because I limited the hand size to 3. So you pick up 3 cards. So like in this scenario, I pick up a 5, 8, and a 9, and then I'd place them down, and then I'd pick up 3 more cards. So let's say I'm trying to complete a 5, and then I'd try and place 2 more down, but I'd have to place them down higher than a 9, because the 9 was the highest card I originally placed. But in the original version of the game, that was relatively similar. It was just that there was 16 ingredients, I think, that you needed to place down. or that you had in your deck rather than 12, so I limited that. And that, for the playtesters which I had at the time, was very, very enjoyable for them. They enjoyed the pushing your luck side of the game. Like, the game is a light engine building, a push your luck, and a risk-taking game. I think those were the 3 tags which I gave it. So that was kind of the saving grace. But just to briefly talk about the reason why I limited it from 16 cards to 12 was because it is very cool and interesting to see how creative players get once they place down the... let's say that I place down an 11. There are 12 cards in let's say I place down an 8, 9, and 11. So I place these down, and because I know there are only 12 cards in the deck, and each one is numbered from 1 to 12, I know that, say I was trying to complete a level 4 a 4 ingredient card, I would know that there is only 1 card in the entire deck, a 12, which would allow me to complete the critic. And because I have 3 down, that would mean it's a 1 in 9 chance. Or more 1 in 3, because you're picking up 3 cards. So it is much easier with 12 cards than with 16 cards, for example, to work out the maths and be like, okay, how likely is it for me to get a 12? Do I risk picking up, or do I instead use some abilities? Do I pick up and then use some abilities? And it's all about seeing how creative the player can get because of these restrictions. Because, yeah, not only does it make it easier, not only does it make it so that the player is more restricted with the choices that it can make, but it also makes it easier for them to be able to track the choices it can make and how impactful those choices can be. And that leads me on finally to the limited hand size, which I briefly talked about. So the limited hand size is 3 for the ingredients. Now, this was almost arbitrary, but it was just because it was a quarter of the 12 ingredients in the deck. So at any given time, when you initially picked up, you had a 25% chance of getting the ingredients that you wanted, theoretically. Obviously, it's not actually a 25% chance because it's all about shuffling the deck and all that. But this limit very much allowed me to very much control what the players did. Because if I go back to the critics again for a minute, I have these critics in the level 1 deck that literally just take 3 ingredients to place down. So what I wanted for every player to do, it doesn't matter really how long they do it for, or how much they do it, but what I wanted them is, at the start of the game, I wanted them to focus on these level 1 critics, because that's when the game shines, is when they get a few of these abilities, they pair them up together, and then they use them together, and they can really achieve some really incredible things by manipulating what cards they draw, the cards they have in their hand size, they can discard cards, and all of these cards work really good together. But what was happening when there wasn't 3 ingredient critics in the deck was that players were maybe thinking about going for harder critics because you get a better reward for them. But that's not the idea of the game. The idea isn't to initially go for the best rewards. The idea is to slowly build up your engine, as it is a light engine building game, and then to move on to the much more difficult cards. And so having the hand size in tandem with these cards being level 3, only costing 3 ingredients, really worked in my favor and really allowed me to control the players. And that was for the benefit of the players because they understood the game much more quickly, having these restrictions, and it really allowed them to have much more fun as well. Finally, I know I'm going on quite a bit. I did want this video to be a bit shorter, but I'm going to talk about the symbol in the top right as well, the luxury ingredients. This allowed me to less control the player, but more, through restrictions, promote creativity. Because, say, for example, if they did go for this level 3 card, it's not quite as simple as that. Because, say you go for this level 3 card, and you only place down... where are the ingredients? And you only place down 3 blue background ingredients, so non-luxury ingredients, then you would not gain the ability for this card. You would only gain the ability if you had, as there is 1 diamond in the top right, you would have to place down at least 1 luxury in order to be able to gain that ability. So, say for example, if you drew those 3 blue background cards, you might even think about trying to draw some more cards with your abilities. despite you already having enough ingredients to complete the order. And that was just one extra thing which I wanted to add to the game, which added this extra decision. Because it's not just about having the right amount of ingredients, it's about having the right ingredients as well. And that connects thematically with the critics, like more snobby critics want more luxury ingredients and all that, but really it was all about the gameplay. And that's pretty much everything that makes FTBS, like all the restrictions, all the decision making, how I have over about 6 months of playtesting slowly been able to manipulate and control the players via my design. And that was taking inspiration from games like Calico, from games like Wingspan, from games like Azul, Sagrada, all these types of games which focus heavily on not what the player can do, but what they can't do. And that right there is how to create these amazing moments of decision making. But yeah, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this type of video of me just talking at you, then I'm more than happy to do more of these. It does mean that I can make a quicker turnaround on these videos as well. For example, the first 3 videos on this channel, this will be the 4th one going up, didn't take a month to make, but it took me a month to upload each one, just because of how much goes into them, setting up lighting, the DSLR, getting footage for different things. It took a few days out of my busy schedule, as I'm launching a Kickstarter. It is very busy at the moment, and it was just very difficult to prioritize them. But if I can just sit down for 20 minutes after I've done some work, right before my lunch, I'm just about to have lunch now, then I'm more than likely to do it. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, then make sure to leave a like. There will be links in description to all sorts, my blog post, the pre-launch page, so if you want to get notified on launch when that goes live for the Kickstarter. It will also, if you're watching this whilst it's already live, that link will convert automatically to the link for the campaign page itself. So if you want to back the game, it's only going to be £15, then make sure to do so. But yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.